the assassinations of JFK, RFK, and Dr. Martin Luther King, unidentified aerial phenomena, also known as UAPs, unidentified submerged objects, also known as USOs, the Epstein client list, the origins of COVID-19, and the 9/11 files.
Anna Paulina Luna's name may sound like a tongue twister, but she is actually being transparent and candid. She's leading the task force on declassification of federal secrets, including JFK, RFK, MLK, all of the Ks, all of those assassinations we're going to get full transparency on, and we're getting the Epstein list, and we're getting the 9/11 files, and the COVID original stories. That's more transparency than I can handle. No wonder the legacy media is falling apart. No wonder we're all feeling a vertiginous grip as we try to cling onto a reality that roller coasts and bucking broncs its way through 2025. We've got so much to cover. Let's have a look at the announcement. Let's consider together, is this exactly the kind of candor and transparency that America voted for?
It is with profound honor that I have been entrusted by Speaker Mike Johnson and Chairman James Comer to lead the House Oversight Task Force on Declassification of Federal Secrets. Together with the help of the White House, our intelligence allies, the Department of Defense, the Department of Justice, we will be conducting investigations into the following: the assassinations of JFK, RFK, and Dr. Martin Luther King.
In a way, I say that what they're indicating is this is a different era. If you can, in truth, reveal classified documents around JFK, UFOs, and then more recent conspiracy theory treasure troves like COVID-19 origins or 9/11, if we're going to get files on Building 7, this is extraordinary, isn't it? I mean, in a way, isn't that more significant than anything else that's happening? Because it sort of shows you the skeletal infrastructures of government that we've long claimed are duplicitously run. If we start getting access to that stuff, I think that's more important even than like staggering and terrifying stories around the Middle East. Don't you think?
Unidentified aerial phenomena, also known as UAPs, unidentified submerged objects, also known as USOs, the Epstein client list.
The Epstein client list. It's like she's reading like the menu for the beginning of this show, isn't it? On the show today, we're going to be telling you about JFK. We're going to be giving you the origins of COVID. Was Fauci lying from the get-go? Why do you need a pardon if you weren't? UFOs are real. They've always been real. We're going to reveal all of that to you in detail. There's not a person been assassinated in the 1960s that weren't killed by the government. And 9/11 was an inside job. I mean, this is coming out of the buildings of government. This is so radical and extraordinary and astonishing. I don't know how power structures can, as we've assumed them to operate, can be maintained with this level of transparency. But Whitney Webb is concerned, so we're going to be looking at that. Let's see the end of this announcement.
The origins of COVID-19 and the 9/11 files. This task force will be a beacon of bipartisanship. On the Republican side, Representatives Burchett, Boebert, Burleson, Crane, Gill, and Mace will be joining me, although I'd like to note that I'm expanding this to the entire governing body and will be allowing certain members to waive on. Our first hearing is set for March. The date will be announced soon, and we've already initiated close to a dozen communications with various agencies, to include Pam Bondi at the Department of Justice and the Secretary of State. This will no longer be a task force that makes bold promises only to fade into irrelevance or send strongly worded letters. This will be a relentless pursuit of truth and transparency, and we will not stop until the American people have the answers they deserve. We will cut through the bureaucracy, challenge the stonewalling, and ensure that the American people finally get the truth that they have been denied for too long. If we are to endure and thrive as a nation, we must restore trust through transparency. The American people must be trusted to think for themselves, to form their own judgments from the truth that they are entitled to know. We've been treated like children for too long and kept in the dark by those we elected to serve us. It is my solemn duty to begin mending this trust, to form a new relationship between the government and the governed. Let us embark on this journey together towards a government that does not serve, but one that enlightens. That does not just serve, but one that enlightens. Trust through transparency, that begins now.
I can't believe that this is all happening. Can you? Let me know in the comments and chat. This seems implausible and ridiculous. She goes on to say that the JFK single bullet theory is plainly absurd and untrue. When Oliver Stone made the movie JFK that explored and exposed many of those ideas in dramatic form, people were like outraged. I don't think Oliver Stone's career ever recovered. Like what I'm saying is, as recently as the 1990s, you couldn't say stuff like that. Now it's in office. Now that's the voice of power. It's a show, Russ, someone says in the chat. Well, maybe, yeah, this is a sort of a reformation of spectacle. But I can't see how you can reveal, for example, if you start telling the truth about 9/11, start telling the truth about the murder and assassination of RFK, JFK, MLK, start talking about UFOs, I don't know how you will be able to maintain institutional power as we've long understood it. Let's have a look at Anna Paulina Luna. Anna Paulina Luna. Like, if you say her name, you want to move to Hawaii. Let's see her talking about the JFK assassination. And then, for a note of caution, we'll go to Whitney Webb, who I think is one of the best journalists working today. She's someone that was talking about the Epstein client list like years ago. You know when people used to say, all celebrities, they're all having it off, government officials have all been blackmailed because they've got sort of shady sex stuff going on in their past, and the deep state has information on them. Whitney Webb's been saying that stuff, and not only that, brought corroborating data so that it doesn't sound like marginal information from your Alex Jones and David Icke. And I think David Icke's going to come on, and I pray for you, David Icke, and I'm so sorry you lost your daughter last year. I can't imagine praying for you. This sort of information now is migrated from the periphery to the absolute center of power. Here she is saying, Anna Paulina Luna, that there's absolutely no way that a single bullet killed JFK. I mean, this is extraordinary, isn't it?
What's your priority list? Because Epstein, 9/11.
Our first investigation will be announced, but it's going to be covering on a thorough investigation into the John F. Kennedy assassination. And I can tell you, based on what I've been seeing so far, the initial hearing that was actually held here in Congress was actually faulty in the single bullet theory. I believe that there were two shooters, and we should be finding more information as we are able to gain access into the SCIF, hopefully before the files are actually released to the public.
There are unconfirmed rumours on X that Edward Snowden is about to be pardoned. I would say that Snowden, along with Assange, are cases that give you an indication of whether or not you can trust someone. You know, like in a fractured political space, you feel like, oh, these people believe this crazy thing. This government believes in these crazy ideas. If someone's like Edward Snowden should be pardoned, I feel like, well, at least they're right on that issue. You know, there's no way that dude should be exiled. 1775. Some companies stand for diversity quotas and ESG scores. 1775 coffee stands for bold flavour, real quality, and the kind of work ethic that would get half of DC fired on day one. If your morning fuel should actually taste like coffee and not like the liquid equivalent of Biden's farts, you're in the right place. Dark roast hits harder than a Trump tariff. Medium roast keeps it bold without the bitterness. And Vitality Mushroom Blend fuels the fight with lion's mane, cordyceps and reishi. Real energy, no synthetic garbage, straight from Bill Gates' lab. Yeah, real coffee for real Americans. Like me. Weak coffee is for the weak, and at Rumble, weak has never been part of the mission. No fillers, no shortcuts, and proudly backed by a platform that does not cut corners, water things down, or settle for mediocrity. For pods, whole bean, or ground coffee, head to 1775coffee.com, use the code BRAND for 15% off, and start your morning with coffee that stands for something. It's happening. President Trump is preparing to issue a full and unconditional pardon for Snowden. The man who sacrificed everything to expose the deep state's crimes is finally getting justice, and the corrupt establishment is in full panic mode. This isn't just about Snowden. This is about tearing down the surveillance state that's built to control you. Is such a thing even possible and plausible? Now, I find it pretty exciting to see these kind of extraordinary ruminations made public, and the new disclosures around JFK, and if there are indeed disclosures around 9/11 and COVID, it seems to me impossible that wouldn't amount to a reconstitution of political power. But have a look at this note of caution from Whitney Webb, who I would have to say, if you were in a situation you had to choose whether or not to listen to Whitney Webb on this subject or me, I'd go with Whitney Webb. And I'd probably choose Whitney Webb over just about anyone. So let's see what she's saying. If you think the deep state was defeated and all you had to do was pull a lever or lever for the right team and you could just watch as everything's made magically better and do nothing but trust the plan and enjoy the show, you probably confused what deep state actually means with the wing of the uni party that lost last year's election. That's interesting. Is this kind of politics the end of the uniparty, or can it continue? Let's have a look. Why is it significant that Tulsi Gabbard's been confirmed? Well, because we kind of consider her, do we, fingers crossed, to be outside of those kind of power structures. Doesn't she reject donations from many of the economic interests that appear to own many of her peers? Mass complacency at a time of drastic, disruptive change is not a recipe for success. Interesting wisdom. Vigilance and scrutiny matter, as does taking responsibility for your own life. Who among us would quarrel with that? And community, instead of placing all of your hope for a better life and world in the government. Indeed, don't we think it's preposterous when people do that from a democratic perspective? These people are saviors. These people are heroes. No, they're at best flawed and fallible human beings. At worst, necromancers and ciphers for dark power. The images I had in my mind there were ciphers of European power rather than your country at the moment. That seems so radical to me that I can't even really get a handle on what's going on. Many of the people who used to distrust the system the most, and who also have most of the citizen-held weapons, I suppose she means online journalists and pundits, have been led to believe they can fully trust everything happening and let their guard down against tyranny. They may not physically come for your guns, but they can still attempt to cognitively disarm the American people. Now, when a journalist uses a phrase like cognitively disarm the American people, you know you're dealing with a refined and brilliant mind, because she's alluding, of course, to your Second Amendment rights to bear arms, and pointing out that just because someone understands the language and tone of conversations about personal autonomy and sovereignty when it comes to firearms, it don't mean that you can rely on them when it comes to your intellectual and spiritual freedom. She's demanding of us that we remain vigilant and awake when it comes to our leaders. And whether you're a pro-Musk Trump person or not, surely you would heed what Whitney Webb is saying there, because this is going to be a radical time. We haven't even got to the advent and intervention of AI and how that's going to impact power, because if AI, like all other forms of technology, is primarily wielded by the powerful, then that's going to create yet more imbalances of power. This is going to be fascinating and interesting time to remain alive. I can see that it's radically different, but that don't mean that it's perfect, as Elon Musk himself said. But that's just what I think. Let me know what you think in the comments and the chat.
Hey, thanks for watching. If you want to see more uncensored content where free speech can flourish, join our live stream. Click the link right here to watch the next video if you want to, or become a member of a growing movement. Download the Rumble app and you'll be informed every time we make a new piece of content. Stay free.